If you've ever wanted to make a villager breeder, you've probably seen designs like these all over YouTube, and for good reason. They're cheap, easy to build, and so simple that anyone can copy it block by block, make a few slight changes, and make money off of all the views they bring in. But what if we could actually make it better? This is Minecraft for the People, a series where I design better farms for beginners that actually work, teach you their mechanics, give you a block by block tutorial and schematics, and provide help channels in my Discord if you have questions. And we may call out some channels that continue to make terrible or stolen farms for profit along the way. In this video, I'll walk you through a new villager breeder design with some cool new features that you've never seen before, such as new easy interpearl chunk loading integration, decreasing villager lag by unloading grown villagers against the chunk wall, a nearly free iron farm attachment and trading system with one extra villager in place, the cheapest and easiest method to date for getting a single villager out in a minecart or a boat to be transported with 0 redstone required, and optional add-ons for pre-selecting the number of villagers bred, recalling the player once they're all grown up, and increasing the efficiency of the iron farm if you want. And of course, there are free world downloads and schematics in the description with no paywalls on content, and at the end of the video there will be a full tutorial showing the easiest way that you can build this block by block in your survival world. So here's all the information for this farm that you want to see in a nutshell, and please note that this is designed for Java edition and will not work on Bedrock. So please do not ask me about Bedrock in the comments. So come with me on a journey as we methodically examine Babymakin. Before we even begin trying to understand these walking enigmas, we need to make sure we have the right tools. Think of it as trying to practice blood magic without a proper Necronomicon. We could probably summon some Eldritch Nightmares, but they may not do our bidding and might become more trouble than they're worth. So first, I want to share the tools that make designing and troubleshooting any breeder and iron farm much easier. The carpet script called AI Tracker. And special thanks to Nico is Lost and Sunrise Parabellum on the TMCC Discord for helping me learn about this and find it. If you download the carpet mod, which you really should do if you want to design any farm at all, just run the command script load AI tracker. This will load the specific script we need and unlock a few really cool commands. AI Tracker Villager Breeding shows a few things above the heads of each villager. First is a timer, and this starts resetting whenever the villagers breed, and whenever it becomes 0 and green, it means that they can breed again. So both of these guys are now able to breed again. And the second is their food portions. And so this guy has exactly 2 portions worth of carrots in his inventory. This guy has 4. This lets you track it visually, which is really nice. And the last thing is bed visualization, which if you've ever tried to do this by yourself, you'll know that this is an absolute lifesaver tool to actually work with, because it just directly draws a line from wherever the villager is to their claimed bed, meaning that there's literally no guesswork with this, which is incredibly useful. AI Tracker Villager Buddy Detection shows the outer range in which villagers can detect a buddy, and also shows the friends they've made along the way in the form of a line that connects an actual buddy group. That's an important requirement for golem spawning. AI Tracker Villager Hostile Detection Zombie shows the scare range in which a villager can be scared by a zombie, and it also works for other mob types if you substitute it instead of the word zombie, for example a pillager. And this mode also shows which villager is actively being scared by a zombie, except it doesn't seem to work well in flashback right now for some reason. AI Tracker Villager Iron Golem Spawning shows the outer range in white where the iron golems can actually be detected by each villager, and the inner range in green where these villagers can actually spawn a golem. And this also shows the time range for the attempts of iron golem spawning and whenever the villager has last slept. And last we have the golem countdown, which starts at 600 game ticks, which is 30 seconds, and counts down whenever it reaches 0. Then these attempts will start being able to succeed, provided that all the rest of the villagers in the group also don't have a golem cooldown. So all this information extremely useful to have visualized here. So my hope is that these tools will be as useful for you as they were for me making this video, because it can be really frustrating building farms without these. This is Minecraft for the people after all, so I want to make sure that everyone has access to this knowledge. Once again, these are all baked into the carpet mod, so if you have carpet mod, you'll be able to use all these nice scripts. So now that we have all that available, let's take a look at the actual breeding mechanics. There are 7 requirements for the miracle of childbirth. In Minecraft, that is. There must be 2 villagers who can get close to each other with line of sight.
Giving yourself to me can never be wrong. If the love is true.
They must have at least 1 portion of food each.
If you believe love, let's get it on.
There must be at least 1 unclaimed bed with 2 air blocks above it that the parents and baby can pathfind to nearby. It must be the right time of day. The parents can't be scared by a hostile mob. Neither parent can be on cooldown from breeding within the past 5 minutes. and the villagers must be loaded. So let's briefly go through these requirements and what they mean. So for number 1, line of sight is pretty self-explanatory. If you press F3B, you can see hitboxes and where the line of sight actually is. In most cases, for a villager breeder, both parents will be in the same enclosure, so this is almost never an issue. But keep in mind that if the villagers can't get to each other, then breeding just wouldn't be possible. For number 2, finding the best food is a little bit more complicated. There are 4 crop types that can be used as a villager aphrodisiac, which are wheat, carrots, potatoes, and beetroot, and 1 portion of any one of these is required for each parent villager for the breeding process to make a baby. Now, you might be tempted to say that this makes bread the best option for crops, as 3 bread only takes 9 wheat to craft, meaning more portions for less items, but we also have to take into account the expected value of harvesting each fully grown crop. Wheat and beetroots only give 1 crop item every time they're harvested, while carrots and potatoes give an average of 3 5/7 food items per crop block, making them equally better. But the really nerdy folks might also be wondering, what about the time it takes to mature each of these crops? Wouldn't that affect our choice too? So this goes into more probability of how crops are grown using random ticks in each chunk and the number of their growth stages, but long story short, wheat, carrots, and potatoes are all grown in the same amount of time on average. While beetroots do grow a little faster, it isn't nearly fast enough to counteract their trash drop rates. So all that to say, carrots and potatoes will both give you the least amount of crop area needed for a villager breeder, and you can use either one of those. Because we want their growth rate to be maximized, we need to make sure that all these plants are at a light level of 9 or above, using torches so that they can grow at night, and we'll be good to go with the most efficient breeding food. But in reality, it's really not that hard to make a little bit bigger of a crop area, so take that for what you will. You could optimize this for the exact perfect size and perfect composter placing, but I mean, there's a reason that this design has kind of evolved to be the meta. It's really simple and easy to build. Plus, if we do it this way, it'll actually help with the chunk border alignment later. So we're just going to keep this shape for now. And also, you may be wondering about this composter here, and this is something that I see a lot of confusion everywhere about. And the theory on this is that the trapdoors allow the villagers to not be able to compost items, so they'll keep more items in their inventory. So you don't actually even need all these trapdoors right here, and let me show you why. Even though trapdoors do prevent the villager from being able to compost items, you'll see that he hardly ever composts anything anyway, and certainly not enough to actually interfere with the breeding of this cycle. And the light block in the middle is also needlessly expensive because you can have the light level increased with just 4 torches on the outside, which is a little bit cheaper. So moving on to number 3. This is where a lot of people have issues, and for good reason. Pathfinding can be really tricky, but there are a few rules that I like to go by. Mobs consider most non-full blocks in the same manner as actual blocks. This means that glass panes, iron bars, trapdoors, and more common blocks can be seen as a valid path to move across. But the interesting thing about trapdoors in particular is that most mobs also see them as a block that they can walk through to get to a target, whereas any other solid block will prevent pathfinding if a mob can't fit through it. This is why you always see trapdoors in mini farms and baby filters in particular. The adults see this as a valid path that they can walk to get to the beds on the other side. The babies are the only ones that can actually fit under a trapdoor. Once they're through, they can try to walk over the one below like it's a full block and get flushed downstream. So not only do the parents need to pathfind to the baby's bed, it needs to be relatively close to the parents, have 2 blocks of air above it, and be unclaimed by any other villager. Using the AI tracker script, we can glean some valuable information. The babies, even whenever they're already through the gate, don't like unclaiming these beds until just before nighttime when villagers usually begin sleeping. This means that only 3 beds between the parents and the baby will result in failed breeding times in the evening. 4 beds in total completely resolves this issue, since both beds will always be unclaimed every night and be available for the next day's babies. So if you ever see less than or more than 4 beds in a single pod breeder in Java Edition, just know that this isn't optimal, and only 3 can actually hurt your rates quite a bit. The 5th requirement is pretty easy. During the morning and evening, when it's time for villagers to breed, they can't be panicking from a hostile mob. There's really not much more to it than that. Let's real talk for a second. I know that it may seem like I'm coming off as an expert when I make these videos, and believe me, there is a lot of knowledge that goes into it. However, a lot of the time I still actually learn a lot whenever I'm making the video itself, and oftentimes I'll have to go back and correct myself, which is pretty annoying whenever I have to redo a lot of the video. And in this case, what I learned has to do with villagers and their trade professions. You see, villagers who have professions and villagers who don't actually breed in different ways. Long story short, there are weird differences in rates that were happening between my design and the theoretical number of villagers per hour, which is kind of important because the whole point of the design was to be a villager breeder. And so digging a little bit deeper led me to discover that the professions of the villagers in the breeder actually does matter. And in order to understand why this is happening, we have to go back and take a deeper look at the daylight cycle in one of these breeders. And so while we're here, we also need to talk a little bit about the 6 requirement. All this is that after villagers breed, there's a 5-minute or 6,000 game tick cooldown until they can breed again, and this applies for both of the villagers. And this cooldown is actually important in a very niche scenario. If we skip straight from nighttime to noon, we'll find that these villagers, even though they don't have a breeding cooldown anymore and they have enough portions to breed, at noontime, both of these guys who have a job are not going to be able to breed. This changes even if one of these guys is unemployed. So I'll go ahead and remove his profession real quick, and we'll see that now they're actually able to breed right away. I need to put particles on so you can see. Then we'll see that they're actually making a baby. And look, they just did, even though it's noontime, even though they weren't before. And learning this little tidbit of information cost me a few hours of my life. Basically, I originally thought that all 3 of these guys would be able to be traded with, but that's actually not the case. You have to have one guy that's a farmer and one guy that does not have a job down here if you want to breed 2 babies per day, which is kind of the point of a villager breeder. And the reason that this is happening is because during the work phase of the day for villagers with a profession are just not able to breed. Even though this is really unclear and I basically just had to find it out via experimental evidence. If the player sleeps immediately at night, it means that the breeding cooldown will be too long for the villagers to breed in the morning, and then they can only breed in the afternoon because of that. It means that you only get 1 baby per day instead of 2 if you're sleeping at night right away, which most people like to do. So if you like having villager trades, you could just deal with that raid issue. You could also wait a little bit more than 40 seconds to sleep at night if you want to be sure that you're making 2 babies. That would also completely solve the problem and let you trade with both of the villagers here. But for the purpose of the tutorial, I'm just going to switch to having 1 villager with profession down here because most people are just going to build it as it is. And the main function of this is to be a villager breeder, so I think that makes more sense. So let's go back to the rest of the video, as the rest of the breeding conditions still apply, and there aren't any other changes to be made there. And by the way, if you're wondering what mods I was just using, is water frames, lucidity, and FSIT. So now let's get back to the video. Finally, let's take a look at the last requirement for breeding, keeping the villagers loaded. This is obviously important, but surprisingly is the most overlooked detail of all. Villager breeding just got a huge buff in 1.21.5, but surprisingly almost no channels have made a design that takes advantage of these cool changes. The changes I'm talking about are ender pearl loading and random ticks. Before 1.21.5, if you had a chunk loader, it was able to load an area, but the process of random ticks was not completed there unless the player was nearby. Random ticks are what a lot of slow game processes use. Crops and plants use it to grow, mud dries to clay over dripstone, cauldrons filled with lava, water, powdered snow, and a host of other processes you can read about in the Minecraft wiki. But now, any chunks loaded by another portal chunk loader or the new ender pearls do process those random ticks. In practice, this meant that before 1.21.5, if you wanted to make a villager breeder using crops as fuel to breed, you'd have to manually AFK the area with the player for days and days until you got all the villagers you needed. And villagers are notoriously laggy, making your game perform worse and worse as time went on in this area. If you weren't there, then your villagers just wouldn't be breeding. But now we can throw a pearl by the breeder and everything will be running normally regardless of where you are in the game, which is pretty cool. So I'm sure you've probably heard of ender pearl chunk loading by now, but you may not know that it loads differently than nether portals. Nether portals load a 3x3 area of chunks essentially like normal, the outer 5x5 ring as what we call lazy chunks, which work exactly the same as the center ones except for entities, which are mobs, loose items, minecarts, boats, or basically anything that moves and has a hitbox. Those won't be processed in the outer ring of the 5x5 chunks. In practice, this means that any of these entities just freezes in place once the center of its hitbox passes from the loaded chunk and hits the lazy chunk ball. Ender pearls work in a very similar way, but they only load the one chunk the pearl is in like normal, and load the 8 chunks around this chunk as lazy chunks. They're cheaper and easier to set up, but give you a smaller area to work with, because our breeder can only occupy the center chunk where entities are loaded. However, this lets us actually use the smaller area to our advantage. Because there's no point in making a new farm unless it's actually clearly better than the ones before, I want to go through all the ways that I think my farm is better than the old meta for the early game. So the 2 main builds that I'm comparing this to are Logical Geek Boy's design and this other one that's extremely popular but is constantly being ripped by every blatant for profit Minecraft tutorial channel. Also, before we get started in this chapter, I have a confession to make as editor potato. So I've been kind of spreading out work on this video over a long time as I was really busy finishing school and getting a job and all that, and it's gone gone really well so far. It also means that there's been this span of like 3 or 4 months that I've been working on this thing, and even though the design I settled on was really solid, I still found an obvious improvement just recently, and that is the piston that was right here, because that could be a fence gate, and that is objectively better and more simple. But you see, that also means that I have all this footage of a piston in this spot that henceforth I'm about to deny ever existed. Man, I'm so glad I always had a fence gate here. That was such a big brain move. So let's get on to the design improvements. So on Logical's old farm here, the system that actually grew up babies into adults was not actually foolproof, and every now and then it would result in a baby getting into the adult chamber up here, which, you know, that's not really a huge deal. But on the other hand, on mine, I have yet to have any issues with this, and look at the incredible timing on that. I've never seen a baby get into this after a lot of hundreds of hours of stress testing this, so you don't have to worry about any babies getting in the adult chamber. And on many designs on YouTube, there are actually 3 trapdoors here, but on mine, there are only 2. On other designs, there's some sort of sticky piston right here to turn off breeding, or the option of just manually putting a block here to stop pathfinding. On this other design, if you're lucky, whoever happens to be doing the tutorial for this may tell you that you can put a block here to stop the pathfinding, but there's not really a system to get in here and make that easy, and there's certainly not an automatic system on either of these. However, on mine, the breeding can be shut off automatically with only this fence gate, this pressure plate, and a small redstone dust line over here, because there are and have never been any pistons in my design. Besides this one up top, that is. Definitely not any others that were ever here. But how this works is this gate actually provides a pathfinding bridge for the villagers to be able to think that they can walk across right here. Wherever the villagers are breeding, they have to think that they can physically walk to wherever the beds are. And so they think that they can walk over and through these trap doors. So they go through here, and then they can pathfind across this fence gate right here and pathfind to the beds. The adults have to be able to pathfind to the beds that the babies will take. So if you had a block right here, as has been explained before, this would stop the breeding cycle as well. But the neat thing about fence gates is that whenever they're opened, they have no collisions at all. So any mobs just falls through it and they don't see that they can pathfind across it whenever it's open. So whenever we want the farm to turn off, we can just open this fence gate by powering it, and that will stop the farm. And we can use the same exact signal that turns off the farm to recall the player with this little inverted torch here, which would flip this trapdoor and bring the player back. And if you don't want this signal to actually recall the player, but you still want a pearl in place, you could just keep this trapdoor powered right here, and that would prevent it from ever flipping, or you could just remove it entirely. It's up to you. And one of the biggest improvements is that on the old farms, all the villagers just kind of get bunched up in this huge pit, and all these collisions are happening. And because villagers are one of the laggiest mobs in the game, having so many of them here just really decreases the performance of your world. And if you leave one of these things on for a long time, you'll notice a very significant lag spike whenever you come back into these areas. So instead of doing what I'm doing right now, you can make sure they're unloaded against a chunk wall. So I paused the game at right about the time that the player would be recalled by the system, just to give you a visual of how this works here. So what's happening is that this pearl is chunk loading this chunk that I'm in right now, which you can see by the borders by pressing F3G. This chunk that I'm in is the only chunk loaded by the pearl that processes entities, which means that all of these guys will behave as normal inside the chunk, but whenever a villager grows up in the grow up system right here, they'll be pushed against the chunk wall. And at that point, even though their hitbox stays right here, all their processing as an entity will stop. That means that all the dumb lag that villagers cause just by existing will go away whenever this guy is unloaded against the wall. And so he becomes just kind of a bouncy surface right here that the next villager, whenever he grows up, will just kind of hit it and be pushed by the diagonal water stream downstream a little bit, and then he'll run into the wall right here. And this just makes kind of a random cascade of villagers unloading themselves against the chunk wall on and on down this line. That's the reason why I have this water stream really long and skinny, is to get as many unloaded villagers as possible in order to breed a lot and still have the performance be really good. So these guys are unloading against the wall, and this line is growing this way and growing and growing and growing until it reaches the end, at which point the next villager will pop up right here, because all the hitboxes will be in the way and he won't be able to be unloaded anymore. So he'll be the first villager that stays loaded. What the pressure plate does is it ensures that we have a good amount of villagers already unloaded against the wall before we recall the player. So the position of this pressure plate is kind of up to you. You could put it right here, you could put it right here, but where you put the pressure plate kind of determines the number of loaded villagers that are going to be in the game. I found that right here is a pretty good compromise where, you know, you'll have 1 or 2, but then like the third guy or so will recall you right about this time, which really isn't that big of a deal. And so the signal from this pressure plate is just a simple redstone dust line that will go and open this fence gate as we talked about earlier, which removes the path right here, meaning that these guys can no longer pathfind and breeding will stop. And if you like, it will recall the player with the pearl. And if you're wondering what is the reason for this weird fence post right here, that's to prevent the villagers from being able to pathfind across this fence that is necessary for the growing up process down here. This is what I'm calling the simple version of the farm, just because it takes almost no materials and it will give you a little bit more than 20 villagers at a time in neat batches, which is what a lot of people like to use for trade haul. But I did make a deluxe version of the farm that's a little bit more powerful, so hang on a few minutes if you want to hear about that. Additionally, if you don't have soul sand or pearls yet, you can actually make this without the chunk loader. You just don't get the cool benefits of the villagers unloading against the wall, and that would also mean that the player has to be here in order for the farm to keep growing crops and making babies and being loaded. You could also use a normal nether portal chunk loader to load this as well. If you already have one in an area, that would work fine. The chunk border between entity taking chunks and lazy chunks is actually in a different spot for the nether portals, as I talked about earlier, so you'd have to take that into consideration. On these old designs, the parent villagers aren't really interacted with most of the time. I guess you could trade with this farmer, but it's not really part of the system. On my design, it's pretty easy to trade for emeralds with this guy up here using the iron farm, so you can get emeralds that way, and then you can use the farmer down here to get golden carrots or any other food that you like. So that's pretty neat to be able to use this as a little bit more than just a villager breeder with just one extra guy up here. You can make it into a pretty decent one-pot iron farm for almost nothing down here. And this is actually a pretty good little setup because you have a starter source of iron, you have a way to get diamond armor from this guy, and you have a way to get golden carrots and then further villager trades with the villager breeder later. And I think hopefully a lot of people will find it useful, because speaking of iron farms, I consider this whole system right here a pretty big improvement over most villager breeders as well. Iron farm villager breeders have existed before, and heck, I even made one, but I really don't think it's been done quite as well as this, mainly because my iron farm breeding trading haul ran into the dual profession issue that I talked about earlier in the movie theater, so that's kind of an issue with that. Have to take the walk of shame on that one a little bit. But a lot of the times, villager breeders are just kind of temporary setups that you only need for a little while and you don't really want it to be your whole system. A big trading haul is a little bit less practical now that villager trade rebalancing is becoming a thing, so something like this should be useful for a lot of different playstyles. And even though this is not an iron farm video, so I can't go super in depth about it here, I want to talk really quickly about how this iron farm setup is unique and how this little one pod system is still very efficient, even though it kind of violates some of the conventions that you see in normal iron farms. So in order to spawn a golem, villagers need to be in a buddy group of 3, which is always fulfilled in this setup no matter where the bottom 2 villagers are because of the buddy detection bounding boxes, so they will always form a buddy group here. Additionally, all the villagers in this buddy group must have slept in the past 20 minutes, which as you can see these guys do every night, and this guy is able to do because of this piston pushing setup, which actually breaks the line of sight with the zombie, allowing this guy to very briefly be able to sleep every now and then, meaning that all of these guys get to sleep, so that is another requirement fulfilled. And although most people, including the Minecraft wiki, either believe or imply that all 3 villagers have to be panicking from a hostile mob to spawn golems, this actually isn't true because you only need 1, but all 3 villagers can't have detected this golem in their range in the past 30 seconds if you want to spawn another one. Additionally, there's a weird golem cooldown that starts whenever the golem is initially spawned, and it applies to all the villagers in the buddy group, even if that golem is spawned outside of the golem detection range of a villager in the buddy group. And if that was confusing to you, don't worry, that's not really necessary for the scope of this farm. It's been a really weird night trying to break iron farms by the geometry of optimal buddy group placing and iron golem spawning outside of detection ranges, and long story short, even with a lot of interesting tricks, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get across the 480 per hour limit that is from a buddy group of 3 villagers at a time. So because we only have 1 villager doing the spawning in this precise area, it will be slightly less efficient than if we had 3 doing the spawning up here, but there's a really large amount of golem spawning spaces down here, and a pretty low time to kill with the drop shaft, which actually takes the golem out of the detection range of the other 2 villagers as well, which also improves rates a little bit, because even if these other 2 villagers can't do any of the spawning, if they can actually detect the golem down here and make this guy up here not able to spawn, which was also very annoying to figure out. And this collection chamber is really simple. We have a hopper, a little bit of water, and lava at the back. On the side, we have a ladder that lets you access the storage down here and transports the player up and down in a very easy to do manner. And at the top, we have this trapdoor so that you can both climb the ladder and also have it double as a spawning space to not lose anything there. So you'll notice that the green iron golem spawning box of this top villager is actually very carefully placed so that it only intersects this top layer of blocks right here. And so that is the reason for all of these weird slabs everywhere else. The bottom slab makes those not golem spawnable because we only want the golems to spawn on this top platform right here. And so that is why it is elevated above the rest. You have to be very careful not to have any golem spawnable block, which is essentially just a flat top surface of any block. Like this trapdoor is spawnable, these blocks are spawnable, but these bottom slabs are not the top surface of the block, so they are not spawnable. Glass is also not spawnable, leaves is also not spawnable. Those are some pretty common ones to think about. And a quick note here, the rates of this iron farm are actually highly dependent on the precise moment you reload these villagers. That means that unloading and reloading them will make the rates fluctuate a little bit for reasons you can learn about in Miku Lost Iron Farm video here. So I found the average rates of this iron farm by doing 14 separate 10-hour tests at random reload times and averaging out the rates to all those tests for the 375 per hour value. The individual specific loaded rates usually kind of fluctuate between 350 and 400, although they can be a little bit above or below that in rare occasions on my testing. So there we go, there's your condensed and by no means exhaustive iron farm info. And one last improvement I'd like to talk about. On these old designs, if you want to get a single villager out at a time, you have to have a dispenser and powered rails down here where you press a button and get one out from the storage. And it's the same thing on logicals, which that one is almost certainly copied directly from. But it didn't seem like anyone cared to improve this or make it cheaper. I mean, why use a dispenser and powered rails whenever you can get away with no redstone at all? And so that's what I've done on my system here, which looks a little strange, but is a lot cheaper and actually is more powerful than the other way. Because this setup lets us get either one villager in a cart, one villager in a boat, or two villagers in a boat with almost no effort at all. So if you want to get one villager in a boat, all you have to do is push this minecart right here, where it will pick up a single villager, break the minecart, and then place a boat in the back of this water stream, and then it will be picked up. And then because of the new strong leads, all you have to do is just attach this here and then go over here, pull him on his way, and he'll pop right out and go wherever you'd like him to go. Likewise, getting two villagers in a boat is also very easy. All you have to do is make sure you place the boat facing this way in the water stream so they don't suffocate. It's also really easy to get these two guys out of this pit using just a lead, although you may need a few blocks in a setup kind of like this just to jump up a little high to pull them out. But otherwise, it's really easy going. Lastly, if you want just one villager in a cart, that's what this rail setup here is for. You can just connect the rails down there, place a cart in the same exact spot before. Once that cart's in place, just put a furnace minecart behind it and then power it with a coal, and you can transport the villager anywhere you want to go on this rail line if that's more your speed. So there's less cost here, and there's actually more variety in the ways that you can move the villagers directly out of the farm. So there's a little bit of tweaking you can do with this farm, so I'd like to list the few different ways that you can change this around for different use cases. So here's the version of the farm that is a little bit nicer for not very much more effort, only a few more materials really used here. So first off, down here we can eliminate the pressure plate system and replace it with a much nicer, just simple little comparator counter from a trapdoor here. And the way this works is we just put the number of items for the number of villagers we want to breed in here, and that will automatically activate this comparator, which will depower the torch and then close the fence gate. This means that the breeding cycle will now be able to begin, and whenever the next baby comes down, it will activate the trapdoor, which will push one of the items from the dropper into the chest above, meaning that this dropper is now a slow countdown for the number of babies, and so that will allow you to exactly program that with a very simple redstone setup here. And the inner elevator is in the exact same spot, so you don't even have to move that if you want to switch from one version of the farm to the other, which is kind of nice. So say in this setup, I wanted exactly 28 adult villagers. Whenever I was recalled, I would put 30 smoothstone in here because there would be 2 babies in the bottom whenever the player is actually recalled. So keep in mind that if you want to be sure you have a certain number of adult villagers, you would add 2 to that number before putting it in the dropper. So for this version of the farm, we would lock it by just powering this lever here, which would make this trapdoor never be able to close. So one strange thing about the bed placement on this version, if the beds were placed in the same spot, one adult villager who doesn't have a profession, if they breed over here, for some reason he can switch beds from that bed over there into one of these beds on the side, which winds up breaking the whole villager breeding process. But I found that if you just move the beds over here, that will never happen, oddly enough. So remember to move the beds over here. If you do move the trap door, for some reason it messes up the pathfinding. I'm not sure why. Just a weird quirk of the villager AI behavior, I suppose. And one more quick thing about this neat system here. The cool thing about this is that even if you have a very large number of villagers being bred, only around 5 or 6 of them will actually be loaded at a time, since any excess villagers will kind of shove the others into the chunk border and make them unload. So that's actually a very nice benefit of this version. Just keep in mind that if you have a ton of villagers here breeding over and over again, and you come back to this area, you could cause a huge lag spike. So another upgrade that you can make is if you want to add 3 villagers up here instead of just 1, you can change the iron rates from 375 ingots per hour to 447 ingots per hour, which is a little bit better. Kind of subjective if it's worth the hassle or not, so I'll let you make that decision yourself. And down here, you may wonder why the skulk sensor is even here, since the boat is pressing on the pressure plate, which is activating the piston. This is a weird edge case scenario that happens so infrequently that I didn't even really know it existed until just now, but I'm glad I caught it before the video came out because some people might have been really confused. Basically what happens is that if you log out at the exact right time whenever this piston is retracted and the boat's kind of falling down a little bit, basically if you unload and reload the farm in that exact instant, there's a chance that the boat can fall on top of the pressure plate and with the piston still down, and then it'll just break until the piston receives a block update. And of course, if that happened, you could just restart it by placing a block and breaking it right next to it, and you wouldn't encounter that issue for a long time. But if you want to make sure it never happens again, I was unable to recreate the issue whenever a skulk sensor is underneath the piston, so I believe this is just about the cheapest and easiest way to completely make sure that never happens. This thing, I guess, could be considered early game. It's really not that hard to find, so I feel comfortable leaving it here even in this beginner farm. One more thing, if you leave a pearl in the stasis chamber and you just want your iron farm to be accumulating a lot of iron as time goes on, you're probably going to want more storage than the 4 chests that are down at the bottom of this pit. So I actually went ahead and put together 2 very simple iron block and bone meal crafters. This one right here just does iron blocks and bone meal by itself. It doesn't actually craft the bone meal into bone blocks. So the iron blocks go into this chest from the crafter and the bone meal goes into this other chest from the composter system. This system right here is a little bit more powerful, where it will craft the iron into blocks here and it will craft the bone into bone blocks here. So you get the ultimate kind of compact storage. Right here I have it just being put into these barrels, but you could easily have hoppers and other chest storage underneath here, and it'd be very simple to figure that out. If you want to put both of these into the bottom of the iron farm, this hopper right here would be the same as the hopper that is picking up items in the bottom here. So just align this hopper underneath the lava block and you should be good to go. I'm not going to include these in the tutorial, so just press Ctrl I on the schematics and you can actually see inside the prefills of all the items so that there's no confusion, and these should be pretty easy to plug into the bottom of the farm if you do want to put these in. Whenever the farm is being chunk loaded, no wandering traders or zombies should be able to get into the bottom, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Just know that extra drops in the bottom could potentially break these filters here if you don't check up on it every once in a while. So I'm starting the tutorial chapter here because I want to preemptively address the issues that I think most people will have beforehand, so please listen to this section before you build it. For this iron farm, keep in mind that the position of the top villager has been exactly placed so that golems can only spawn in this elevated grass area, so make sure that any other blocks on this specific level right here are not able to be golem spawnable. So that means they need to be a bottom slab, which is why I have all these as bottom slabs. Glass or leaves are other common examples. You can place buttons to spawn proof certain blocks. If a golem spawns in a place that's not on this spawning platform, it won't be able to get to the killing chambers. So make sure that these are the only golem spawnable blocks on this Y level. You can also review the wiki if you have any questions about what blocks can spawn a golem and which can't. And another thing that I anticipate could possibly mess up people's farms is that if this zombie in a boat is not precisely aligned over the middle of this glass pane, that means that the zombie's eye contact to this villager won't be behind this glass pane right here. And what that means is that if the zombie has continuous line of sight to this guy, he will not ever be able to sleep. And if he's not ever able to sleep, then he will not ever be able to spawn any golems. It's worth double checking that this is still pretty darn close to being centered. Additionally, you're going to want to make sure that one of these villagers does not have a profession down here. I talked about this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. Make sure that only one of these villagers is a farmer and the other guy doesn't have a profession, and then you will get the maximum breeding rates all the time. Also, keep in mind that a pillager could be able to fire over this if it gets close enough. If it's being pearl loaded, you will never have to worry about them spawning. Just make sure that no patrols come by whenever you're in the area. If there is one, then just go ahead and take care of it quickly, and it should never be an issue. And once again, if you do upgrade the farm to the version with the counter and the tripwire, make sure that you do move the beds over to this other side like I talked about earlier. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into the tutorial.
Let's get it on. Since we got to be here, listening, I love you. There's nothing wrong with me loving you, baby, no. And giving yourself to me can never be wrong. If the love is true, oh baby. Let's get it on.
I know it's been a little while since my last video, so thanks for staying patient and waiting for this one to come out. It's been a lot of fun to work on, even though it's been a little bit more simple. Rest assured, I have more farm ideas and other non-farm ideas for videos that should be coming pretty soon, so stay tuned for those. As always, taking my time to make higher quality videos just means that videos come out a little bit shorter, so I appreciate your patience. Remember that if you have any questions, my Discord Spud Central is linked in the description, so feel free and hop in there and I will do my best to help answer your questions. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.